Hello again, everybody. This is the third part of our discussion of Section 15 for History 231, the Roman Republic from 133 to 55 BC. And we left off last time talking about this fellow Pompey the Great. And Pompey, of course, was a brilliant general and a brilliant guy, and kind of an interesting one as well, is because he keeps retiring. We're not entirely sure what he had in mind when he did this, but he keeps popping back up again because he's incredibly competent, incredibly skilled general, and this sort of thing. So we left off last time where Pompey had retired here, returning to his army after his many conquests, and he had his army intact, and he could have actually used his army to just seize power, but he doesn't do that, and it's possible he was hoping to have legitimacy, real political legitimacy, even though Rome is falling apart so fast at this point that means less and less here. All right, it was a mess in Rome. So anyway, he appears to have been wanting to use real political means to gain legitimacy, but it doesn't work. And the problem, of course, he has is the same one many of these other fellows are having, and that is this: his troops need land. They need a place to go. They need something to take care of them, or there's going to be more trouble. And he's unable to do this. He's unable to give his troops the land and the rewards that they need in order to stop all of these various problems. And so this is going to be a serious, serious problem. It's going to continue to grow, and we've talked about it several times. This is one of the big problems the Romans had. They did not take care of their veterans, and their veterans produced an angry, well-armed urban mob, and this began to increasingly affect Roman politics here. Now, into this scenario, into this situation, a new character now appears, and his name is one that many of you are probably familiar with. This is Julius Caesar. Okay, Julius Caesar is quite famous. His name, of course, has come down through us through history many, many times. The idea of a Caesar being a king, an emperor, and that sort of thing comes ultimately from the name Julius Caesar. You find it in things like the Russian Tsar. All sorts of names come from this guy's name. So his name's outlived him by a long margin here. And he's a very interesting guy here, all right? A very interesting guy. He was born in 100 BC. Brilliant speaker. He was an excellent orator. He could sway a crowd. He was extremely ambitious, and he was willing to take risks. He's willing to take risks to get what he wants. And he realizes the way to get what he wants, which is power, is to get people to like him. He is a populist. He appeals to the average Joas Schmoas in Rome, the average plebeian, the average person in Rome, and because of his charisma, if he can deliver on goodies to them, he's going to have a lot of friends and a lot of backing in this sort of thing, all right? He also realized that you gotta also take advantage when you win a battle. You take someone out. You don't necessarily kill them. Sometimes you try to make them into your ally, and he was actually quite good at this. He realized that one of the things the Romans liked, all right, was big public projects. They liked things like big stadiums and big buildings and this sort of thing, and he spent lavishly on this, on big public projects, which of course has the advantage of employing people, but also puts his name on big, obvious buildings and things like this, all right? So imagine if the university that we all love so very much at CCSU was actually called Professor Vedler University, right? It had my name on it. Well, everyone would know who I was, and I might be able to leverage that for political advantage to go into politics. Now, of course, if I'm ever crazy enough to go into politics, you need to commit me immediately, because it sounds like a miserable sort of job to have to do, and I don't think I'd be very good at it. I'm much happier being a history professor, and then I can have my nice office in a building named for somebody else. So my political ambitions are very, very low, but Caesar's, his were very, very high here, all right? And so he manages to get himself elected to various things, including Pontifex Maximus, which of course is the head of the priesthood. He gets himself elected praetor in 62 BC. There's only one problem. He's spending a lot of money to do this. I mean, we're talking a lot of money. And he's borrowing to do it because he's a risk taker. People who borrow extensive amounts of money are taking a big risk. And I always tell people, be very careful about your borrowing. Mortgage borrowing is fine to a certain extent, and education borrowing to a certain extent is fine, because those are things, those are investments you can remake. But don't go borrowing tons of money to buy the latest hot stock, okay? Invest your money in stocks, absolutely, but don't borrow money to do it, all right? Only invest money that you have, not money that you wish you had. Well, Caesar doesn't listen to this. And so what Caesar does is he gets himself hugely into debt. And he needs to get out of debt. So how do you get out of debt? The best way to do it is to get command of an army. When you get a command of an army, you get a percentage of the loot that the army gets when you conquer whoever you're conquering. So he gets himself command of an army, and of course he's extremely good at military stuff. He's a military mind, a brilliant military mind. So he gets his debts underwritten by no other than our friend Crassus, this unscrupulous profiteer. So he gets his debts underwritten by Crassus. And this way, our friend Caesar can go off to Spain, which is where he goes. He gets to the Atlantic coast with his armies. He has all sorts of successful stuff, and he gets a lot of money for it because, of course, he gets a proportion of the loot. He comes back from Spain with enough money that he actually gets to campaign for consul, one of the two heads of state of the Roman Republic in 59 BC. So at this point, you've got three guys. You have Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, all of whom are the big players in the Roman Republic, and they're all working together because they all share interests with each other. This will last just as long as they share interests together. As soon as they don't, well, there's going to be trouble. But for now, they do. Pompey wants a ratification of settlement for his veterans. He still have to worry about all those veterans from his troops here. Crassus wants support from a group of his followers who, well, they kind of screwed up and overbid on the tax farming thing, and they're in trouble, and they need help, right? And so, sure enough, Caesar wants to get these two guys to get him more military commands here. More military commands. And Caesar at this point does not disappoint. He pushes through, over the objections of the Senate, a land bill for Pompey's veterans. He gets the tax bill revised for Crassus's speculators, and another law passed ratifying Pompey's decisions in the east, all the areas Pompey had conquered in the east. This is a risky time, however, for our friend Caesar, okay? Keep in mind that not all of his laws are technically valid, but he pushes them through anyway here. And he pushes through things like land reform and that sort of thing, which, of course, keeps his veterans happy here. At this point, we actually see these three guys getting along really quite well. Pompey actually married Caesar's daughter, a young lady named Julia. The Romans were unbelievably uncreative with names for daughters here. So Julia is named for her daughter Julia here. And it's kind of interesting because it's a political marriage connecting these two guys, but in a nice romance novel sort of way. It turns out Julia and Pompey really loved each other. It was a really sweet thing. I'm not sure how you could love a guy like Pompey, because he's, after all, a mass murderer and a butcher, but, apparently she was okay with that. So Julia and Pompey hook up, and it's actually quite sweet. So somebody should write a romance novel about those two. Just be prepared for a X rating for the violence, because that's Pompey, all right? So this is what we start to see. We see more political machinations going on, and all sorts of things there here. Now, Caesar now starts attacking the Gauls. He starts fighting with the Gauls, all right? He starts pushing up into what is today France here. And this means, of course, that our friend Caesar is getting more and more powerful all the time. And eventually, these three guys sit down. They get together at a place called Lucca in the province of Cisalpine, all right? The three get together, and they cut a deal. Now, they cut a deal that Crassus and Pompey become consuls in 55 BC. They get their commands to be secured. The power of and Caesar gets his power, his command in Gaul extended. And what this means is the moderates in the Roman system, the ones who are saying, but wait, just a second here, guys. Hold on. What about those term limits? Let's talk about term limits. Nobody's paying any attention to the moderates at all. The moderates have been pushed completely out of the picture. They're off the page, and quite frankly, nobody cares. All right? Nobody cares what they think. Let me read you a quote from one of the moderates. It is a fellow named Cicero. Let me quote this, because it's very interesting. And I quote, "What could be more degrading than our present life, especially mine? I am regarded as a madman if I say what I ought to on public affairs, as a slave if I say what I have to, as a prisoner of war if I say nothing. I am as miserable as you'd expect." End quote. In other words, the moderates are pretty much gone, and the Roman state is now being run by these three strong men, all of whom have personal armies, and all of whom are running things themselves. And where's the Republic? And this is the really important question we need to ask ourselves. Once you ignore your laws, once you start ignoring term limits, you start ignoring everything you put in your Constitution, everything you put into your system of laws, and you start doing what is convenient, you go down this dark, dark path. And the Romans are now well down this dark path, and it is not going to end well for them. And on that exciting cliffhanger, we come to an end of this section, and in the next section, we're going to see how, well, spoiler alert, it all falls apart, and it's really quite unpleasant. All right, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, be safe, take care of yourself, take care of each other, make sure you're all okay, and I will hopefully see you all very soon.